In the world of film and animation, where anything is possible, the connections and associations one may draw also seem to be limitless. All may depend on the lens the viewer is looking through, rather than the creator's initial intentions. But film being an art, it isn't supposed to be straightforward. Even if the creator had a concrete idea for the meaning of his creation, the viewer is left to ponder.
What's your favorite mental illness?
So, don't hug me, I'm scared. In my opinion, it's a fascinating piece of art. I like to think of it as a visual and auditory representation of insanity. The words to the song remain childlike, yet cryptically eerie. The music and visuals slowly intensify and speed up until the viewer is left terrified and confused. A strange feeling develops by the end of these clips. Some kind of existential crisis is experienced. Over the course of the 6 episodes, we see a story develop. In my theory, Red Guy is the main character. He is the one experiencing present time. Everything revolves around him. When he wakes up in episode 6, we see the world is populated with other Red Guys. But more importantly, he wasn't even a part of the dream he seemed to have awakened from. The final episode features the yellow guy, alone. All the way up until we see him drowning in oil as the musical lamp is chanting Bad Dream. Then the scene transitions to the red guy awakening from his nap at work, while echoes of Bad Dream can be faintly heard. You can hear the sounds of the two realities actually overlapping one another. To me, this suggests that Red Guy's imagination has a lot to do with the series. I wouldn't say that everything we see is just happening in the Red Guy's head, but with further explanation, I would like to suggest that the main set of the series is actually a place where past, present, and future meet. Alright, so why was the red guy dreaming about the yellow guy having bad dreams? Well, I think a big clue comes from an interview of the characters. Put a link to the full interview below, but I want to focus on this section here. Red guy has a reoccurring dream where he's 10 years old, lost in the woods, and being chased by something. I think this is significant. As you can see in this image and following clip, there are many similarities between Red Guy's quote and Yellow Guy's bad dream experience in episode 6. Especially when you consider that Red Guy seemed to have awakened after this exact segment. Assuming he is a younger kid, I think this points towards the Yellow Guy being a rendering of the Red Guy's younger self. There's much more to this theory, but also much to go against it. I just think that the episodes go a little deeper than attacking children's programming. I get a sense of a time travel element. This comes from the phone booth appearances in episodes 5 and 6. Red Guy and Yellow Guy's father, Roy, are both seen at phone booths. And of course, if Yellow Guy is a rendering of Red Guy's younger self, then Yellow Guy's father must be a rendering of his older self, with aspects of his real father. Roy is what Red Guy is afraid of becoming, what's chasing him through time and its continuation, and they are both visiting what I believe to be a rendition of Red Guy's childhood stages where he first encounters big philosophical questions. This is the main set of DHMIS. When looking at Roy, he is mostly seen on the outside looking in. Then, at the end of episode 4, Red Guy exits the main set and becomes an outsider as well. I think he realizes here that there is something behind the scenes pulling the strings in his reality. Someone is behind the curtain. In episode 5, Red Guy sees what things look like from an outside perspective. He then leaves the time matrix of his childhood behind and attempts to become an adult. However, he makes the mistake of trying to bring his friends, the yellow guy and Duck, with him. He tries to save them and bring them to life in the real world, but is rejected. This rejection sends him back into his fantasy world. He hasn't left his childhood behind. This startles Red Guy. He seems to understand now that he is in his own imagination. Then we find him exactly where the audience would expect Roy to be, working the controls of the yellow guy's nightmare while previous episodes are shown. What he was afraid of is actually happening. He is becoming Roy, the person pulling the strings. It was Red Guy all along. At this point in my theory, I rely on some full-length films to provide some parallels for the ending sequence. I want to bring up the films Memento and Shutter Island. If anyone's seen Triangle, there's some correlations there as well. At the end of these three films, the main characters come to the realization that their own minds had been responsible for their problems. It had been their own self that they were fighting against. Then they choose to forget what they had learned and relive their delusions. Instead of moving on, the insanity continues. I think most people would agree that Red Guy comes to 3 epiphanies over the 6 episodes. 1 in episode 4 and 2 in episode 6. The one in episode 4 is Red Guy's scene behind the scenes of his reality. He probably feels a little bit like Truman Burbank. I also like the idea of Red Guy realizing here that yellow guy is an image of himself. The shot zooms in on the yellow guy's head, which is a balloon here, and then the red guy's head pops like a balloon. So obviously this could be a meaningless connection. This scene is just so strange, it doesn't really give much to go off of. However, we did see a pretty substantial piece of evidence back in part 1 of my theory. Alright, so that's my best interpretation for the first epiphany. The second and third both involve Roy. When Red Guy sees him in the back of the audience, and when Roy appears in his imagination. I almost think that this is Red Guy's jacket and where he was sitting, but if you look at this picture, there's no double doors behind his chair. This might just be a technicality, but if not, could Roy be sitting where Red Guy was? Did Red Guy's clothes morph into Roy, both being a symbol of his adulthood? So it's not exactly clear if they were both sitting in the same spot, but notice it does look more similar than the double door background. So I think the second epiphany is Red Guy realizing Roy is his older self, his impending adulthood. Now we have his final epiphany, and what Red Guy has now realized to be his own imagination. Only this time is different. He's in more shock than any of the previous discoveries. This is where Red Guy realizes that it was he who was behind the musical nightmares. Roy is trying to bring Red Guy back to the real world and grow up already. But as we know from part 2, Red Guy sees an alternative. Forget what he has learned and continue to live in his fantasy world. This cowboy is running from himself, but it was easier to forget that and keep on running. His middle is haunted. At first I thought Yellow Guy said his middle name is haunted in the interview, but he just says he dreams his middle is haunted. I didn't think much of it since the characters do say some pretty random stuff in the interview, but I think the interview is a big clue, and that's why they did it. Then I noticed that in all of the photos where we see the 3 friends together, Duck is never in the middle. It's always either the red guy or the yellow guy, even in the kitty drawings. And since Red Guy is our main character and Yellow Guy is his younger self, The photos could represent the two with their puppets at different times in Red Guy's life. We see Yellow Guy in the middle in the kitty drawings, in his bedside picture, and in the photo referenced as far in the past in episode 2. But the most consistent picture we see of the three is the one where Red Guy is in the middle. I think it represents the present, where Red Guy is now in control of the puppets. So obviously there are pictures of Duck and the Red Guy by themselves, which complicates this idea. But if the main set is a representation of Red Guy's imaginary world, then causality is something that would be absent, and his world would operate on spontaneity. Realities would overlap, characters could die and come back to life, details would be as they are in a dream, reoccurring yet sporadic and volatile. Just like in a dream, there would be some consistencies in the story and series of events, but also blatant inconsistencies such as skipping from one setting to another and lack of memory.
Something's different.
Something's missing.
But if we look at the consistent details, the reoccurring themes, it's possible to know what really has a basis in reality. Such as the clown drawing drawn in episode 1, a detail that is a focal point of the first episode, continues to show up throughout the 6 episodes and even on into the new pilot episode. But what's odd is that it changes. We see it covered in oil in episode 1, and it's shown to be covered in episode 2. But there are times when it is seen with no oil at all. Then we see in the new pilot it is only partially covered. And here it has a date on it. So far it's one of 2 photos seen with a full date at the bottom. The first one is referenced as far in the past in episode 2.
The past is far behind us. The future doesn't exist.
Also notice that this clown painting is between past and future in this scene. Well, between past and future we have the present. So here we see that if this picture is from the past, then the oil has progressed and the original painting is now covered. I think Red Guy drew this when he was younger and has a real basis in Red Guy's actual childhood. Yellow Guy, being an image of Red Guy, brings it to life because of its real significance. So why has the oil progressed over time? I think what we might have here is a metaphor for the turning point, where Yellow Guy transitions into Red Guy. Yellow Guy drowns in oil in the last episode. He's more traumatized here than any other time. So the significance of the oil progressing is Red Guy gradually becoming depressed and unable to cope with the real world. And as we know, Red Guy might have done this to himself. Yeah, it's hard working with the time travel component. There's always paradoxes and potential loopholes, but what's more confusing than time travel? I mean, the plotline is clearly meant to be mysterious and confusing, so why not hop in that phone booth and visit your younger self as your own past hallucination? Alright, now we're going to go back to the idea of the main set being a rendition of when Red Guy first faced big questions as a child. This is true, but it is formed from Red Guy's perspective in view of the world. In the live action scene, we are shown Red Guy's perception of his fellow Red Guys. I think it is clear that he is overly critical of the real world. So the show is Red Guy's interpretation of what society has taught him. Red Guy failed to join the real world because of his negative opinions on society as a whole and the learning process it provides. With this new quote, Clayhill seems to be some kind of cult or commune, and considering it has dark secrets, it's probably a cult, which also goes with the idea of Red Guy breaking off from society. But Clayhill isn't actually a real cult society, it's a more expansive version of Red Guy's hallucinations of his imaginary world. But in this world there is chaos. Red Guy unknowingly controls all the puppets. Here, he creates a villain for himself to fight against. I want to start off the recap by admitting that Matt Pat is right. Red Guy is the director of the show that is his own imaginary world. We see him break the fourth wall because he unconsciously knows what is going to happen. He directed it. And as he slowly starts to become conscious of this, he chooses to forget it and relive his delusions with small changes each time. The ending shot seems like a low-budget set because Roy failed to bring Red Guy to the real world. He is no longer a factor because Red Guy chose to live in his fantasy world instead of become an adult. Now in Clay Hill, Duck will become the new villain and corrupted influence. And based on my theory, eventually, Red Guy will once again face the truth that he is behind the duck. If you look at the Wakey Wakey thumbnail, Red Guy is looking down at the duck and the yellow guy, seeming to be controlling them. I also wanted to give some real credit to Inside of Mind, because I did build off his theory a bit, but obviously mine is different on some key factors. So I don't think the ending of the series is necessarily a happy one. Instead of facing adult life, Red Guy sinks deeper into his imaginary world, now complete with an entire town. So I did learn some from Inside of Mind, but honestly the Amazing World of Gumball episode gave a huge clue by itself. I also considered the idea that some details are meant to act as a red herring, something to throw people off. Like the date, June 19th, 1955. I think it might be a dead end, at least in relation to our world. When we see the date change in the final seconds, this is because a loop has been completed. The final epiphany has been realized and forgotten. The groundhog has retreated from the sight of his own shadow.